This is Jed Disler, and welcome to The Piano Maven, your friendly podcast guide to piano recordings. I'd like to invite you to subscribe to The Piano Maven through my Substack page, and I've provided a link to do so in our episode description. Subscribers get a free download at the start of each month, usually in the form of a rare piano recording from my big collection of recordings. I'm also open to suggestions if there is anything that you would especially like that you can't find anywhere else. But your paid subscriptions help keep this podcast alive and afloat, so please consider doing so. The other day, I uploaded an episode about recordings of the Chopin Barcarolle, and one of you wrote me to ask about a recording of the Barcarolle that I had not included in my list, which was a live performance with Sviatoslav Richter that came from his Salzburg Festival recital of August 26th, 1977. And he mentioned how this recital was a particular favorite of his. This concert was issued on the Orfeo label in 1998, and I'm not sure if it's still in print or not. And to be honest, I had not listened to this disc in quite a while because, as you know, there are massive amounts of live Sviatoslav Richter material out there, and the quality of the performance and the sonics tends to be variable, and you just have to wade through all of this to find the best of Richter. I mean, there's so many. He tends to be pretty consistent. But, you find the same works popping up over and over again over the years. I think once I counted something like 56 surviving Richter recordings of Chopin's Polonaise Fantasy, or some number like that. But that said, I think that this August 26th, 1977 recital is really worth talking about because, first of all, the engineering is really superb and it captures Richter's tone wonderfully well. And it really gives a sense, too, of the warm acoustic of the Kleine Festspielhaus in Salzburg. And also, for the most part, Richter is on top form in this recital. The concert opens with Beethoven's Andante Favori, which was the original and ultimately rejected slow movement for Beethoven's Waldstein Sonata. And although Richter made an excellent studio recording of this work for EMI, I think around the same time, there is a lightness and a flexibility to the Salzburg performance that I frankly prefer. And Richter, of course, makes child's play out of the double notes and octaves. They are just so suave, and the limpidness of his legato is positively seductive. And you really notice the composition first and the pianism second. Of course, the pianism is really spectacular. Next in this recital is a Chopin group. The A-flat Waltz, Opus 34, number 1, has a nice sense of line, but no particular charm. But the muted introspection that Richter brings to the slow A minor Waltz, Opus 34, number 2, works really well, and he meets out the rubato with real care, almost as if a conductor is in charge. The Opus 34 number 3 waltz in F major, the so-called 2/4 waltz, Richter plays rather fast, and maybe he's a little perfunctory about it. It doesn't have the charming character of, let's say, Rubinstein, to be honest. But I really like Richter's straightforward and meticulously detailed account of the Scherzo number 2 in B-flat minor. And this always was a piece that Richter played well throughout his career. Maybe some of his earlier live versions from the 50s and 60s are more ardent and have a little more abandon, but Richter really does wonders in how he times the phrases and transitions in the trio section in the Salzburg performance. It's really quite gripping. Now, I can't say that I agree with our listener 100% about Richter's Salzburg performance of the Barcarolle. For my taste, I think it's a little too inward and sober for the most part. It lacks the rocking lilt and soaring melodic shapes with which Rubinstein's versions still spoil me. But Richter does gather up his energy for the coda, which has real power and proportion, and he ties everything together really well. But perhaps it's a matter of too little too late. It's not really my favorite Barcarolle, although I can say I respect it more than I love it. But Richter really works his tonal magic in the Debussy Suite Bergamasque. His tempos for each of the four movements are perfectly judged, and so are the balances between his hands. It's a beautiful, beautiful performance. The étampes of Debussy that closes this disc I think are almost as good. He plays the opening pagode in a slower and dreamier style than in his live Deutsche Grammophon recording from 1962, which I think has more rhythmic backbone and forward motion. But La Soirée de Grenade is gorgeous, the second movement of this suite. And I think Richter handles the textural levels like someone playing three-dimensional chess. He plays the toccata-like Jardin sous la pluie with lots of color and tonal shading. But it's only when you compare this Salzburg performance to the earlier live 1962 DG version that you realize that the younger Richter's articulation is just a little more incisive and crisp. And I should mention that one or two notes fall ever so slightly out of tune over the course of this Salzburg recital. I mean, there's nothing nearly so apparent or blatantly out of tune that distracts in the way that live Concertgebouw Beethoven Diabelli Variations does from 1986. Anyway, I'm very happy to have reconnected with this Salzburg recital, especially for the Andante Favori of Beethoven, the Chopin A minor waltz and B flat minor scherzo, and the Debussy Suite Bergamasque. These are my top choices of this recital, although everything really is top drawer, but those are the ones that I keep coming back to. So is this disc absolutely essential for your Richter collection? No, not necessarily. But if you do collect Richter, you will be happy to have this well-engineered recital in your library. And I'm certainly glad that I've held on to it in my collection. This is Jed Disler, and you've been listening to The Piano Maven, your friendly podcast guide to piano recordings. Thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to being with you for our next episode.